All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Beast Wars Optimus Primal. Now, this is not the original release of this mold. This is the more recent Walmart reissue. But aside from a few paint differences and stuff like that, it's for all intents and purposes the same figure. Just same mold, stuff like that. And yeah, this is a really nice chunky figure. I had a lot of Beast Wars figures as a kid, but I never had an Optimus Primal, at least not this version of him anyway. And yeah, he's quite an impressive figure. Like, obviously, he looks a little bit silly and goofy compared to like some of the more realistic sculpting nowadays, but for the time, like, this is a really fantastic figure. In this mode, he's got his nice gorilla sculpting and stuff like that. He's got a few gimmicks. The first one I'm going to show you is mostly meant for robot mode, but you can use it here. He's got this little button on his butt that when you press it, it's kind of hard to get them both to do it at the same time, but let me see if I can do it. You press it and hey, it actually worked. He flips over these cannons over his shoulder like that. Again, really more meant for robot mode and looks way better in robot mode, but you can do it here, and then there's a little button on there that you can fire the missiles with. And yeah, usually when I do it, it usually is the case that like only one of them will go up. Like if I press it, it's usually just that one, unless, oh, there I go, there's the other one. And so it can be kind of tricky to get them both to do it, but it's just one of those things that like you just have to get the hang of it and figure out the idiosyncrasies with the mechanism, stuff like that. And then the other gimmick that is really more meant for this mode is he's got this little thing on his back here, which is it's nice that they have it be able to disguise like this, because what you do is you lift it up and then you push it in and it becomes this little lever that is like connected to the arm mechanism. So if you get one of the arms out to the side, I never can remember which one it's supposed to be, but yeah, it's the other one. Okay, so I want to bring this one out and that one in, and then you can do this motion where you're pulling this lever back and forth, and he's doing this this chest pumping action. It's a little bit haphazard. Like, it definitely takes some finagling with how the arms are positioned and stuff like that. But it's really cool that that is a gimmick that they decided to incorporate with this guy, and B, that they gave it some way for it to kind of like hide away and be more ignorable. If you just want an action figure without the gimmick part of it, you take the lever and you kind of pull it out, and then you can kind of like press it back in. It takes a little bit of finagling to get it back into the spot, and that's about as flush as I've been able to get it. But what's nice is they've designed it so that even when you don't have the gimmick activated, you can still move the joints without breaking the mechanism. They just act as ratchet joints. So it's kind of I only find it messes with his arm articulation a little bit when he's in robot mode, and I'll get into that later. But for the most part, it ends up being pretty unobtrusive in the scheme of things, which is nice. Articulation in this mode, there's obviously nothing at the head. It's just kind of a big chunk on here. The arms can go forward. They can go out to the side, and I can talk about this now a little bit, but the mechanism going out to the side can be like you kind of have to get it to the next ratchet point, but it doesn't exactly lock in that exact position. So you can get it in a variety of different poses, but it's not quite as simple as just like, oh, move it to here and then it stops there, because it does end up being a little bit floppy due to the mechanism. The forearms here can rotate on that ratchet joint, and that does operate much more like just a regular ratchet joint, which is nice. And then the elbows here can bend up about that far, which is nice. The legs, you've got some articulation, but like this is around where his knee is supposed to be sculpted. There's nothing there. You can kind of bend it back, which you could use for some poses, but it does reveal a bit more of the white there. So I don't really find the leg articulation particularly useful. You can kind of wiggle the toes a little bit too, but like, mostly I think you're just going to want him in a big, gorilla kind of pose like this. So, it doesn't really need to have a tremendous amount of articulation in this mode. And for the most part, most of the Beast Wars figures don't have much articulation in their Beast mode. But, it's enough there that you can do some expressive poses and stuff with him. For comparison's sake, just for, again, my standard size comparison, here he is with Siege Sideswipe in this mode. So you can see he's a pretty chunky fellow. And the comparison I think that matters the most to me is here he is with Kingdom Optimus Primal, who is absolutely dwarfed by this guy. It's hard to say which one of them is like a better figure overall, because it's like it really depends on what you prioritize. If you want a figure that's super accurate to the show, has good posability, and scales well, obviously the Kingdom figure is the way to go. If you want, a figure that is fairly accurate to the show and is just like a big, chunky, very, very playable toy, then I'd say the original one is still a fantastic figure. But they don't really compete in my mind. I like having them both. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to compare him with. Transformation, it's actually pretty similar to this guy. More so this guy's transformation is fairly similar to him because he definitely came first. But, he's got a few different choices, like, the head doesn't actually become the chest in robot mode, or the back of the head. So they've done a few different things, but a lot of it's the same. Like, it's still like, move the shoulder pads up to become the arms, unfold the legs. It's mostly the same sort of general scheme with a few extra steps, because like really the first one kind of got it right for the most part. He was already a fairly well proportioned robot, which is why the show design doesn't really deviate from his overall silhouette a whole ton. But yeah, so to transform him, you want to straighten out the legs like this and bring them down. These the feet, just like on the Kingdom version, you can pull them down and they've got that piston there, which is pretty cool. What's kind of funny is instead of just the regular gorilla modes being toes, you flip it around, so he's got, I guess, sort of these faux gorilla toes, or really just like a differently shaped heel, well, however you want to think about it. But yeah, you do that, then you rotate him around at the waist. He's going to start getting kind of tall, so we'll adjust the camera here a bit so we can get him more on frame. The arms, very simple. You just bring them down, rotate the forearms forward, and then the shoulder pads here actually have this little sort of latch. And what's cool is like when you're articulating him with the shoulder pads down for gorilla mode, like that peg has a whole slot to kind of operate under, so that it actually like moves up and down on that joint, which I think is kind of cool. But like I was kind of struggling for a while to pull the shoulder pads up before I realized it was stuck on that. So you do have to make sure that this little joint here clears that peg, and then you can bring the shoulder pads up and lock them in place. And then last but not least, you take the whole gorilla head here, and it can be kind of tricky sometimes to get out, but you just want to pull it up at the neck there. And then what's kind of cool is the ears on the gorilla mode end up actually being part of this joint that it's rotating on. So you want to bring that down, and then the gorilla face flips around to become the chest, and then goes back down onto the monkey mode, gorilla mode chest. And here's his head with the mutant mask. So like here he is officially in robot mode, but if you want to get him to his more show accurate appearance, the Beast Wars original toy line had this element that they did not choose to incorporate in the show, where like most of the figures had these like mutant masks where they'd have their regular robot head and then this more monstrous mask. Some of those monstrous designs ended up being the basis for the show models, like Tarantulas and Waspinator, whereas for some of the other figures, they use their more robot-y head designs, like Optimus Primal. So to get the mask out, you just pull it down on this joint, and well, I guess really you want to rotate the whole head around first, and then the joint that is on rotates separately from the actual robot mode head, so you can kind of flip the mask down like this into the back section, then rotate the head while holding that in place, and then take his little side antenna spikes here and then kind of pull those up. And that's much more accurate to like what he looked like in the show. Just get a little bit more space here. But yeah, there he is in his robot mode design. And yeah, he looks super great and really pretty accurate to how he looked like in the show. Like, aside from like not the proper scale with the other, original Beast Wars toys, it's pretty accurate. Obviously they've chosen him to give him a more typical Optimus Prime faceplate here, whereas in the show they had that open. He used the faceplate a few times in the show as like a battle mask, but for the most part, he had that open faceplate design like the one that we see on the Kingdom figure. But, you know, for the original toy, I think that works fairly well for him. But yeah, he's a nice, big, chunky figure. Articulation-wise, the head, it's on a swivel both like on the mask and without the mask. Like there's a separate joint there. So sometimes when you're moving the head, the mask tries to come with it. If you just hold it in place, you can swivel the head without moving the mask. But it can be a little bit annoying to like get this to stay in place. And I wish it had somewhere to like actually properly lock in some regard, but it works well enough. The shoulders are obviously fairly similar to how they were before. They can rotate around like that, and you know there's some ratcheting in there just from the mechanism. They can rotate out to the side, but again, like, you know, they're kind of linked together, so it can be, you can get it in different positions, but it does take a little bit of finagling. He's got that bicep swivel, bend at the elbow there. The hips are now on ball joints. They're maybe a little bit looser than I'd like them to be, but they've got a fairly good range, and they sort of act as, you know, as much of a thigh swivel as he's getting. It's not like, it doesn't have like an actual cut for the thigh swivel, but, you know, that works well enough for at least most candid poses. He's got, you know, just from transformation, pretty much a little bit over 90 degrees of bend at the knee there, and then the toes can also hinge up for transformation, which I find can be useful in some poses where he's, you know, kind of balancing on one toe. So like, you know, it's fairly actually pretty standard articulation, even for a modern figure. You know, the Beast Wars figures were such a departure from the other, like, you know, everything that we'd gotten from G1 before that, and that they actually had like a pretty decent amount of articulation. But yeah, he's a pretty nice figure overall. In terms of gimmicks, obviously the same one that we saw last time with this button back here, you can do that again, and it looks even better in this mode, where these are flipped up over his shoulder, and obviously you can still launch those. Underneath here, his swords are stored. One just kind of fell out, but they just have a little peg right here that goes into a little slot. So, you know, they're not the tightest fit ever, so sometimes they fall out when you activate that mechanism, but it's nice that he's got those swords stored in there on both sides. You can put those in his hands. I always have a hard time remembering which way they're supposed to go, because they look a little bit awkward either way. I'm pretty sure it's like this. One thing that's worth noting is this release of it in comparison to the original, the blue plastic that they used for the sword and the missiles is a little bit greener and lighter than the like more, you know, bluey blue of the original release, which, yeah, it doesn't look quite as good, but you know, it gets the point across. And then apart from the swords, this guy, the fun thing about this guy is he has just like a bunch of gimmicks and stored weapons and stuff like that. For this forearm, if you open up this little hatch here, this little gun arm springs out, which is super cool. Now it comes with 2 extra missiles that are just the same as these missiles that you can put in here. Unfortunately, they're big enough that they can't store like that in like when it's all folded up, but they do fit in there just fine if you want that, and they can fire as well. And then you just have to, this is like on a spring, so you have to fold this back up and get his forearm back and then close that panel. And then on this forearm, if you open this one up, you have to like squeeze this panel a little bit. It can be kind of annoying to get these panels open. There we go. He's got this weapon, which you can take out and close that back up, and it's Paleotrex's head. Obviously, the head sculpt for Paleotrex was designed to look like this weapon from the original Optimus Primal, which is super cool. But yeah, it's a little ball and chain sort of mace-ish kind of weapon that he can hold like that. Very weird, very cool. You know, I like the design for it. I get why they didn't really use this in the show, because this is very like metal compared to like what the rest of the weapons for the Maximals typically looked like. So I get why they didn't really use that in the show, but it's a cool weapon nonetheless. And you know, the one thing that's nice about this is, aside from like the 2 extra missiles that you can use in this cannon, all of the weapons store perfectly in both modes. They're either like internal weapons to the figure, or you know, they have places to go, which is more than you can say for a lot of like, you know, recent figures. So it's worth noting because it's impressive how it all fits in there. And obviously, this is like a very big sort of playable, toyetic, gimmicky toy, but it's nice that that was a consideration so that you're not having like parts left off to the side, because the internalized weapon storage was really something that was like mostly started with Beast Wars. Like for the most part, a lot of G1 figures had their weapons just kind of like you just leave them off to the side in car mode, which, you know, is even worse than what they do now, where they just like peg weapons onto the outside. But you know, that's neither here nor there. The other thing to mention is he can still use his chest pounding gimmick in this mode. Like obviously all the mechanisms are still hooked up. Although, you know, obviously his arms, you know, you still have to like pose them to go into that position. But they also have these little latches on the side of his upper arms here that if you flip these up for each one, it actually sort of like redirects where the mechanism is moving. So if you you have his weapons here like that, and you activate that gimmick again, now it's just his forearms that are turning, so he can swing his mace and swing his sword. And you know, it looks a little bit goofy, but that's a really cool mechanism how they're able to, like, you know, basically by flipping a switch, you can change where that motion is going. So you can, you know, swing his shoulder with this one or swing the elbow with that one. It's just a really neat idea, and that was something that I didn't really know about this figure going in. But yeah, so he's a pretty nice playable figure. I love all the action features. And now to show off some comparisons with him in this mode, here he is again with Siege Sideswipe, just for that standard size comparison. And you can see he's much bigger. Here he is with Kingdom Megatron, who's a leader class figure. So you can see they really stand, you know, like pretty much at eye level. Obviously, like proportionally, his head is much bigger, but you know, I think they look fairly good together. Obviously, like this is not scale accurate to the show, which is why they made Kingdom Optimus Primal Voyager. But it's nice to see the two of them together. I don't have the original Beast Wars Megatron just yet. I'm still waiting on the reissue of that one to show up, but that's what they look like together. Whoop. Real quick, here he is with Nemesis Primal, just so you can see a comparison with the face-plated Optimus faces here, because, you know, he was the one who had the more toy-accurate head sculpt in comparison to Kingdom Optimus Primal. And last but, of course, not least, here he is with Kingdom Optimus Primal, just so you can see what they look like together. Obviously, he is much bigger. You know, in terms of like show accuracy, I'd say the Kingdom one is still, you know, much more accurate to the show than this one is. But, you know, in terms of being a fun toy that still does look like the character from the show, this is a really awesome guy. And it's just like neat how much of the features that they sort of kind of replicated here with Kingdom. Like he's got like the wrist rockets or whatever, although of course they operate a little bit differently than his. He still comes with the swords and stuff like that. Although, you know, ways that he's even better than him. His swords actually store in in his alt mode, whereas his just kind of peg onto the outside. But, you know, you can give him his swords like that. And what's kind of fun too is, you know, if you want to, you can use, like, it's the same 5mm peg there, so you can give him the old swords, and similarly, you could give him the new swords if you wanted to. I think that they look better holding their own swords, but it's neat that that is an option. And then, of course, you know, though it didn't come with him itself, he also does come, or you can also use the Paleotrex head that I showed off earlier that came with that fossilizer to give him that mace weapon. And, you know, if you're really wanting them to get a lot, if you're wanting them to look more like each other, you could kind of like wrap up the mace like that and then and plug it on, so that you're really kind of, you know, giving them the same sort of armament here. I think that's a cool kind of display to have with them sort of like matched up like that. But yeah, you know, overall, like I still like the Kingdom figure better, just because, you know, in terms of what I prioritize in my collection, it's a little bit more in line with what I like. But it's always nice to have just like a fun sort of gimmicky, toyetic toy. And like it's the original Optimus Primal. It's a fantastic toy. But yeah, there's not really a ton else to say about this guy. He's definitely a great figure. in terms of getting this one versus like trying to track down an original one, like yeah, I mean, I think that like most of the original one, the differences between this one and the original one is better. Like he's got some paint on the inside of the chest here to pick it out. The blue is a little bit better. This one, he does have a like much more show accurate color scheme on the head here, whereas the original one had much more of like a bright blue. But like, you know, for the most part, I think the original one has like more paint schemes and kind of better colors overall. But yeah, it can be kind of tricky to find an original one that has like all of the parts and stuff like that. So, you know, I think if you had the choice and it was an easy way to find both of them, then the original one is probably the way to go. But if you don't want to have to like hunt for all the different parts, then this is a great option to have to just be able to get the Walmart reissue and just have all the parts guaranteed with it. And yeah, that's you know, pretty much all there is to say about the guy. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Beast Wars reissue, Optimus Primal.